At 0847 hours Indochina time on the 8th of October 1967, 6 Douglas A-4E Skyhawks roll into their dives over Kiến Air Base outside Haiphong, and North Vietnamese gunners assume the tiny jets carry too little ordnance to matter. Each aircraft weighs 24,500 pounds loaded, less than half a Phantom's mass. Each hauls 6 Mach 82 500-pound bombs on triple ejector racks. Defense planners in Hanoi have counted on weather, interlocking flak, and short runway margins to shield the field. The lead pilot's voice crackles over the intercom, "Pickle." Seconds later, 18,000 pounds of high explosive walk across concrete and revetments. By 0851, all 6 Skyhawks are feet wet, climbing toward Yankee Station. Kien An will stay closed for repairs until mid-November. The smallest attack jet in the Navy's inventory has just rewritten the calculus of interdiction. Hanoi's air defense staff believe that only heavy bombers or medium attack jets, F-4 Phantoms, A-6 Intruders, can deliver enough ordnance to suppress a hardened airfield. Soviet advisors reinforce the assumption light single-seat aircraft lack the payload and the sensors to prosecute defended targets en route Package 6. American planners share some of that doubt. The A-4E carries no terrain-following radar, no all-weather nav suite, and no second crewman to manage systems. Its combat radius forces a single refueling bracket on long strikes. Maintenance officers call it the scooter because it looks fragile. Fleet squadrons fly it because carriers lack deck space for an all-Phantom Air wing. By October 1967, conventional wisdom holds that Skyhawks belong on close air support hops over South Vietnam, not over Haiphong's gun rings. Kiến An is about to prove conventional wisdom incomplete. Kiến Air Base sits 7 kilometers southwest of Haiphong's port district at coordinates 20 degrees 49 minutes north, 106 degrees 40 minutes east. The People's Army of Vietnam Air Defense Force, Phong Cong Cong Quan, operates the field as a forward staging strip for MiG-17 interceptors and an emergency divert for MiG-21s out of Noi Bai. A single concrete runway, approximately 2,200 to 2,400 meters long and 45 meters wide, runs northeast-southwest. 12 earthen revetments line the western taxiway. Each shelters 1 fighter plus ground equipment. 57mm and 37mm anti-aircraft artillery batteries occupy 8 positions within 1,500 meters of the threshold. 4 S-75 Divina SA-2 guideline sites ring the city at ranges between 12 and 25 kilometers, forming overlapping engagement envelopes above 2,500 feet. Weather over the Red River Delta in early October typically brings scattered clouds at 3,000 to 6,000 feet, visibility 5 to 8 kilometers, and humid haze that blurs optical bomb sights. Pilots call the environment the weather and the guns. Carrier Air Wing 16 aboard USS Oriskany. CVA-34 operates from Yankee Station in the Gulf of Tonkin, roughly 95 nautical miles southeast of Haiphong. The Air Wing includes 2 A-4E squadrons, VA-163 Saints and VA-164 Ghost Riders. Each squadron keeps 12 jets in the ready rotation. 6 are available for any single launch cycle. The Douglas A-4E Skyhawk measures 40 feet long with a 27-foot wingspan. Empty weight, 10,450 pounds. Maximum takeoff weight, 24,500 pounds, driven by a single Pratt & Whitney J-52 turbojet producing 8,500 pounds of thrust. Standard strike loadout, 6 Mk-82 500-pound bombs on triple ejector racks, 3,000 pounds total ordnance. Ingress speed runs between 480 and 520 knots. Pilots roll in from 8,000 to 10,000 feet and release between 2,500 and 3,500 feet above ground level. Time on target lasts 3 to 4 minutes from initial pop-up to egress. The climb back to altitude and sprint to the coast takes less than 90 seconds. Fuel burn is high. Round-trip distance is just under 500 nautical miles, requiring one mid-air refueling from a Grumman Ka-3B Sky Warrior tanker orbiting over the southern Gulf. Navigation relies on dead reckoning and visual waypoints. The pilot's only bombing aid is a manual bomb sight reticle. There is no radar warning receiver. Crews detect SAM launches by watching for white exhaust plumes or listening to radio calls from dedicated iron hand escorts. Each A-4E carries 200 rounds of 20mm ammunition in 2 internal Colt Mach-12 cannon. Guns serve as last-ditch defense or for strafing secondary targets. Kiến An sits inside a SAM threat ring but below the altitude where SA-2s typically achieve reliable track. Low-altitude ingress, below 4,000 feet, forces gunners to rely on optically aimed flak rather than radar-guided missiles. That flak is dense. 57mm guns fire 4.5 kilogram shells at 1,000 meters per second in 6-round automatic bursts. Muzzle flash and black smoke puffs mark every salvo. A jet diving at 500 knots covers 1 nautical mile every 7 seconds, giving gunners a narrow engagement window. The Douglas design trades sensors and armor for simplicity and speed. When every pound matters, the A-4E carries bombs instead of black boxes. On the 8th of October 1967, that trade will define the mission. Strike planning begins at 0600 on the 8th of October aboard Oriskany's Intelligence Center, 1 deck below the flight deck. Commander Robert C. Mandeville, commanding officer of VA-163, reviews overnight reconnaissance photos from an RFHG Crusader sortie flown on the 7th of October. The images show 4 MiG-17s parked in open revetments at Kien An. Fuel trucks sit near the eastern taxiway. Mandeville notes the weather forecast. Broken clouds at 4,000 feet, visibility 6 kilometers, wind from the northeast at 8 knots. Ordnance officers calculate loadouts. 6 Mach-82s per jet gives the strike package enough destructive mass to crater the runway and damage revetments without requiring a second wave. The operations officer assigns 6 A-4Es from VA-163, call sign Saint, plus 2 A-4C Skyhawks from VA-164 configured with AGM-45 Shrike anti-radiation missiles as Iron Hand SAM suppressors, and 2 F-8E Crusaders from VF-162 as MiG-cap. Launch time is set for 0730. Time on target will be 0847, just after local sunrise when visibility improves, but before the heat haze thickens. Deck crews in yellow jerseys begin spotting aircraft on the bow catapults at 0645. Ordnance men in red jerseys load Mk-82s onto triple ejector racks, torquing arming wires and safety pins with mechanical precision. Each bomb weighs 531 pounds fully fused. The yellow nose cone houses an instantaneous contact fuse. Pilots brief in the ready room at 0710. Mandeville traces the ingress route on a grease pencil chart. Feet dry at the Kuakam River mouth, then northwest along Highway 10 to the IP, initial point, 2 kilometers south of the airfield. He emphasizes timing. Roll in 30 seconds apart, pickle at 3,000 feet, pull 4 Gs, then get your nose down and run for the water. Altitude discipline is survival. Too high and the SAMs have time to guide. Too low and small arms, fire becomes a factor. Every pilot copies the egress heading, 135 degrees, onto a kneeboard card. At 0728, the first A-4E taxis onto Catapult 1. The deck edge operator gives the wind-up signal. The pilot pushes the throttle to full military power, checks gauges, salutes, then braces as the CAT officer drops his flag. Steam hisses. The holdback breaks, and 24,500 pounds of jet and ordnance accelerate from 0 to 150 knots in 2 seconds. The Skyhawk clears the bow, dips slightly as it transitions from deck to air, then climbs into the morning overcast. 5 more launches follow at 90-second intervals. By 0735, the strike package forms up at 8,000 feet, heading west-northwest. The tanker rendezvous occurs at 0752 over open water, 20 nautical miles from the coast. Each A-4E plugs into the Ka-3B's drogue, taking 1,200 pounds of fuel in a 3-minute evolution. Radio discipline is tight. Only the strike lead and the Iron Hand flight transmit. At 0820, the formation crosses the coastline at Kua Kam. Mandeville descends to 1,500 feet, using a ridgeline for terrain masking. The landscape below is patchwork, paddy and dike, scattered villages with tile roofs and narrow dirt roads choked with bicycle traffic. No SAM launches are observed. The Iron Hand A-4Cs orbit high, radar seekers active but silent. At 0843, the IP comes into view, a distinctive canal intersection south of the runway threshold. Mandeville arms his ordnance panel, checks the master arm switch, and calls, "Saints, this is lead. Stand by to roll." 4 minutes remain until weapons release. Kien An's control tower sits on the western edge of the apron, a squat concrete structure with a red tile roof. From inside, a North Vietnamese air traffic controller spots the formation and keys his radio. Maybay Mai, American aircraft, low, south sector. Flak batteries respond instantly. 37mm guns open fire first, their tracers arcing upward in lazy orange lines that accelerate as they close. Then the 57mm batteries join in, pumping 6-round bursts that detonate in black puffs at 2,000 and 3,000 feet. The sound is a rolling crump, 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 loud enough to be heard over the Skyhawk's engine whine. Mandeville pitches up to 9,000 feet, rolls inverted, pulls the nose through until the runway center line sits in his bombsight reticle. The world narrows to dive angle, airspeed, altitude. At 3,200 feet, his thumb mashes the red pickle button on the control stick. Commander Robert C. Mandeville, commanding officer of VA-163 Saints, on the 8th of October 1967, from the CVW-16 after-action report says, "Pickle, mark." 6 Mk-82s separate from the triple racks, tumbling briefly before their fins stabilize the trajectory. Mandeville pulls 4 Gs, feels the G-suit inflate around his thighs, then rolls wings level and shoves the throttle to the stop. His jet accelerates through 500 knots as he descends toward the deck. Behind him, 5 more A-4Es repeat the evolution. Pop, roll, dive, pickle, pull, run. The entire sequence, 6 aircraft from initial roll to final egress, lasts 187 seconds. Not a single Skyhawk takes a hit, but the runway does. The first bomb string impacts at 0847 hours and 22 seconds. Mandeville's 6 Mk-82s fall in a line 180 feet long, crossing the runway at a shallow angle. 3 bombs detonate on concrete. The other 3 strike dirt between the runway and the taxiway. Each 500-pound warhead produces a crater 4 feet deep and 12 feet wide. Concrete slabs buckle upward. Rebar twists into jagged spikes. A dust cloud rises, brown and gray, shot through with orange flame from secondary fires in a nearby fuel cache. The second Skyhawk's bombs land 15 seconds later, offset north by 200 feet. 2 hit revetment walls. 1 penetrates an earthen berm and detonates inside, collapsing the structure onto a parked MiG-17. Shrapnel punches through the EO fighter's aluminum skin, shredding hydraulic lines and fuel cells. The 3rd and 4th jets place their loads on the eastern apron, destroying a radar van and 2 ammunition trailers. By the time the 5th Skyhawk rolls in, smoke obscures the target. The pilot pickles using the runway's general orientation and a visual offset from the control tower. His bombs crater the threshold, ripping apart approach lights and fracturing drainage culverts. The 6th jet targets the taxiway intersection. 2 bombs blow a 10-foot gap in the asphalt. rendering the link between runway and revetments impassable. Total ordnance delivered, 36 Mk-82s, 18,000 pounds of high explosive. Total time over target, 3 minutes, 7 seconds. Post-strike reconnaissance imagery, flown by an RF-8G Crusader at 11:20 on the 8th of October, confirms 11 distinct craters on the runway surface and 4 collapsed revetments. 7th Fleet Intelligence annotates the photos. Kien and runway unserviceable. Estimate 10 to 14 days minimum repair time. Flak continues throughout, black puffs forming a curtain from 2,000 feet to 4,000 feet. Tracers crisscross the sky in streams of orange and white. One 57mm shell detonates 20 feet from the 4th A-4E during its pull-off. The pilot feels the concussion as a sharp thump through the airframe. He checks engine instruments, all needles steady, then keys his radio. St. 4, no hits, continuing egress. The Iron Hand A-4Cs detect 2 SAM radars tracking but no missile launches. The attack runs too low and too fast for effective engagement. At 0850, all 6 Skyhawks clear the coastline, descending to 50 feet above the water to break radar lock. They form a loose tactical formation, spacing 500 feet apart, and set course 135 degrees toward Yankee Station. No MiGs scramble from Kep or Puc Yen. The North Vietnamese Fighter Command holds its interceptors on the ground, wary of the MiG cap orbiting overhead. On Kiến An's cratered runway, a North Vietnamese maintenance crew emerges from a bunker to assess damage. The senior sergeant counts 11 craters on or immediately adjacent to the concrete surface. 4 revetments are destroyed or heavily damaged. 1 MiG-17 is a total loss. Electrical power to the control tower is out. The backup generator struggles to start in the humid air. Fires burn in 2 locations, the fuel cache and a storage shed near the eastern perimeter. The base commander, a People's Army colonel, radios Hanoi at 0910 with a preliminary report. Senior Colonel Nguyen Van Hung, commander of Kiến An Air Base, on the 8th of October 1967, from the VPAF Historical Archive translated says, "Runway closed, repairs required, estimate 10 days minimum." He does not mention that the attackers were single-seat, single-engine jets, half the size of the Phantoms' gunners. Expected. In Hanoi, Phong Kong Kong Quan staff officers review the incident and note the weapons load. 36 bombs from 6 aircraft. A Soviet advisor calculates the tonnage and compares it to typical F-4 or A-6 strikes. Major Tran Hu Phuc, VPAF operations staff, on the 9th of October 1967, from a post-war interview with VPA Press, says, "We expected heavy aircraft, intruders, maybe B-52s from Thailand, not these small jets." The realization spreads. Payload per aircraft is less important than total ordnance on target and delivery accuracy. Kien An's repair crews work around the clock, filling craters with crushed stone and pouring rapid-set concrete. The runway reopens for limited operations on the 18th of November, 41 days after the strike, with full capability restored by late November after engineers reinforce taxiways and add 3 new revetments. During those 41 days, MiG-17s divert to Kep and Gia Lam, complicating sortie generation. Ordnance stockpiles at Kien and drop below operational minimums. Resupply convoys face renewed airstrikes along Highway 5. The strike's immediate effect is tactical, 1 airfield offline. Its second-order effect is conceptual. Defense planners can no longer dismiss light attack jets as irrelevant to hardened target interdiction. Aboard Oriskany, intelligence officers note that 6 A-4Es delivered effective tonnage comparable to 4 A-6s at lower cost. The myth of too small to matter dies in concrete dust. While North Vietnam built its flak rings to stop heavy bombers, the Navy sent scooters. Precision and speed, not mass, decided the outcome. The A-4E's design history explains why 6 jets could crater Kien when conventional wisdom said they could not. Douglas aircraft engineers began work on the Skyhawk in 1952, responding to a Navy requirement for a carrier-based jet attack aircraft weighing less than 30,000 pounds. Chief designer Ed Heinemann imposed a radical constraint: halve the weight of contemporary designs while maintaining payload and range. He stripped away everything non-essential. No radar, no navigator station, no powered flight controls. The airframe uses aluminum honeycomb panels and titanium fittings. Total empty weight reaches only 10,450 pounds. Wingspan measures 27 feet. The delta wing generates lift at slow carrier approach speeds, but remains efficient at 500 knots. The single-engine layout saves weight and simplifies maintenance. The J-52 turbojet is rugged enough to tolerate ingested debris and salt spray. Fuel capacity is 800 gallons internal, plus provisions for 2 300-gallon external drop tanks. Maximum combat radius extends to 340 nautical miles on internal fuel alone. With one tanker rendezvous, the jet can strike targets 500 miles from the carrier. Ordnance stations total 5. 1 centerline, pylon rated for 3,000 pounds, and 2 wing pylons, rated for 2,250 pounds each. Triple ejector racks allow each wing pylon to carry 3 Mk-82 bombs, doubling effective loadout without adding drag. The manual bomb sight, a simple reticle etched into the windscreen glass, requires pilot skill, but eliminates the weight of a radar bombing system. Pilots train for dive bombing using geometry and muscle memory. Roll inverted, pull through to 30-degree dive angle, stabilize, pickle at the correct altitude and airspeed. The technique dates to World War II, but it works because the fundamentals, gravity, ballistics, human reaction time, remain unchanged. By 1967, Navy A-4E squadrons have flown the jet in combat for 3 years over South Vietnam and Laos. Pilots know its limits. The stick is heavy at high speed, requiring both hands during hard maneuvering. The canopy offers poor rearward visibility, and the single engine is a single point of failure. They also know its strengths. The jet accelerates faster than a Phantom in the transonic regime. It can pull 7 Gs at combat weight, and it fits 2 aircraft into the deck space one F-4 occupies. Carrier Air Wing 16 keeps 24 A-4Es aboard Oriskany, split between VA-163 and VA-164. Maintenance crews work 12-hour shifts, 7 days a week, keeping jets flyable in the humid salt environment. Corrosion is constant. Every access panel must be inspected for salt pitting. Every electrical connector cleaned with dielectric grease. Engine changes happen on deck, often at night under floodlights, with the ship pitching in 6-foot swells. Ordnance loading is a choreographed ballet. Red shirts push bomb carts into position. Yellow shirts signal the crane operator, and the pilot watches from the cockpit to confirm arming wire tension. On the 8th of October, the 6 jets that strike Kien average 1,840 flight hours each. The youngest airframe was delivered in March 1966, the oldest in August 1964. Commander Mandeville's jet, Bureau number 151108, has 2,230 hours on the Hobbs meter. He flew it on a close air support mission over Quang Tri Province 3 days earlier, then again on a coastal reconnaissance hop on the 6th of October. The consistency of the platform matters. Pilots learn every quirk. This jet pulls left in a dive, that one burns fuel faster at altitude, and compensate instinctively. Lieutenant Commander James R. Robbie Robertson, Executive Officer of VA-164 Ghost Riders, on the 10th of October 1967, from a Naval History and Heritage Command oral history, says, "You could feel the bombs come off. The jet got lighter. the nose pitched up maybe 2 degrees, and you knew you'd pickled clean. That tactile feedback loop, pilot, machine, weapon, closes in milliseconds. Automated systems add latency. The A-4E's simplicity eliminates it. Over. Kien An. That 2-degree pitch change tells Mandeville his ordnance is away before he checks the panel light. He reacts immediately, rolling wings level and pushing the nose down, shaving a half-second off his exposure time in the flak envelope. Multiply that half-second by 6 jets, and the cumulative reduction in vulnerability becomes measurable. Flak gunners trained to track targets for 3 to 5 seconds before firing. Anything less yields low hit probability. The Skyhawk's speed, 500 knots in the dive, accelerating to 520 on egress, compresses engagement windows below trained thresholds. North Vietnamese 57mm crews report firing 180 rounds during the Kien strike. None connect. Post-mission analysis attributes the miss rate to target speed and the optical tracking difficulty imposed by smoke and haze. A heavier, slower jet, an A6, an F-105, would have given gunners an extra second per pass. That extra second changes outcomes. Douglas's weight-saving obsession in 1952 saves lives in 1967. Carrier deck space drives procurement, but physics decides survival. The A-4E proves that a light jet with a good pilot and a simple bomb sight can achieve target effects indistinguishable from radar-equipped heavy attack aircraft. Complexity is not a prerequisite for precision. Soviet doctrine assumes otherwise. American strike planners begin to question that assumption. By late October, MACV analysts note increased A-4E sorties against route package targets. The jet's fuel efficiency allows more frequent launches per deck cycle. Its lower maintenance burden keeps availability rates above 75%. While MiG hunters chase headlines with sidewinder kills, scooters chew through the logistical sinew that keeps the North Vietnamese war machine mobile. Small airframes, large consequences, and Kien An is proof. The human dimension of the strike becomes clear in the post-mission debriefing aboard Oriskany at 14:30 on the 8th of October. 6 pilots from VA-163 sit in the ready room, flight gear still damp with sweat, while the Air Wing Intelligence Officer records their accounts. Commander Mandeville describes the flak as a curtain. You could see it building as you rolled in, and you just fly through it. He notes that his jet shook twice during the pull-off, likely from concussion rather than shrapnel impact. Maintenance crews will find no damage during post-flight inspection. The 57mm shell that detonated nearby left no mark. Lieutenant Junior Grade Paul R. Stevens, flying the 4th A-4E, reports a near miss at 0849. Lieutenant Junior Grade Paul R. Stevens, pilot in VA-163 Saints, on the 8th of October, 1967, from the CVW-16 debrief transcript says, "I saw the flash at my 2 o'clock, maybe 20 feet away, orange center, black smoke. Then I felt the thump through the airframe and thought, well, I'm still flying, so keep going." He does not realize until wheels down on Oriskany's deck that his jet has ingested debris through the engine intake. Post-flight inspection reveals minor compressor blade erosion. The engine will require replacement during the next maintenance cycle, but it runs smoothly enough to bring him home. That resilience, absorbing damage and continuing the mission, defines the Skyhawk's operational reputation. The Air Wing Commander, Captain James E. Ramage, reviews gun camera footage from the Iron Hand A-4Cs and escorting F-8E Crusaders. The film shows 6 A-4Es in sequence, each diving through the same patch of sky, each pulling off at nearly identical altitudes. Ramage notes the discipline. No early pickles, no panic pulls, no deviation from the briefed attack geometry. Captain James E. Ramage, CAG-16, on the 8th of October, 1967, from USS Oriskany deck log says, "Textbook execution. proof that training and repetition produce results even under fire. Training begins months earlier at Naval Air Station Lemoore in California, where replacement pilots fly practice bombing runs over the Chocolate Mountains range. They drop inert Mk-76 practice bombs, small 25-pound versions of the Mk-82, refining dive angles and release altitudes until muscle memory takes over. The scoring system is unforgiving. A bomb that lands more than 50 feet from the target center line earns a failing grade. Pilots repeat the evolution until 50-foot accuracy becomes routine. That standard translates directly to combat. Over Kien On, 36 bombs impact within a 400-meter square, effectively saturating the target area. Human factors, researchers later study the strike as a case example of skill retention under stress. Physiological stress, G-loading, adrenaline, hypoxia risk at altitude, compounds cognitive stress from flak, SAM threats, and navigation workload. The A-4E's manual flight controls demand constant stick and rudder inputs. There's no autopilot to reduce workload. Pilots compensate through procedural discipline. Checklist items are memorized, radio calls are standardized, and emergency procedures are drilled until reflexive. During the Kien strike, no pilot misses a checklist step, no radio call is garbled, and no emergency procedure is required. That zero-defect performance reflects not luck, but the cumulative result of 1,500-plus hours of flight training per pilot. The cost of that training is high. The Navy loses approximately one A-4 per 10,000 flight hours in peacetime accidents, mostly during carrier landing evolutions. Combat attrition in 1967 runs higher. One jet lost per 2,500 sorties in Route Package 6. But the Kien mission adds no losses to the tally. North Vietnamese accounts offer a different perspective on the same events. A 57mm battery commander, interviewed in Thai Designpom 1985, recalls the frustration of tracking fast-moving targets through haze. A VPAF OA commander whose identity is withheld, commanding a 57mm battery at Kiến An on the 8th of October 1967, from VPA Historical Archive, says, "We fired as fast as the loaders could feed shells, but the jets were small and fast. By the time we adjusted fire, they were already pulling away." His battery expends 78 rounds in less than 4 minutes. None score hits. The expenditure rate highlights a logistical reality. Each 57mm shell weighs 4.5 kilograms and costs the North Vietnamese economy roughly 1 day's labor per round in production and transport costs. 78 shells represent a significant munitions investment with zero return. The imbalance, high cost to defend, low cost to attack, favors the attacker only when execution is precise. Sloppy bombing wastes ordnance and gives defenders time to repair. Accurate bombing compounds disruption with psychological pressure. Kiến An's repair crews work under the assumption that another strike could arrive at any moment. That assumption slows repairs. Workers scatter to bunkers at every distant engine sound. Concrete pouring happens in short bursts between alerts. The 41-day closure is partly a function of actual damage and partly a function of disrupted workflow. American strike planners cannot measure the psychological component directly, but they observe the extended downtime and infer causation. By November 1967, Kiến An appears on the restricted target list. No further strikes are authorized without explicit approval from Commander-in-Chief Pacific, ensuring the field remains a low-priority diversion rather than a primary operating base. The single strike achieves durable effects not because it obliterates the target, but because it demonstrates that obliteration is possible whenever the U.S. Navy chooses. Deterrence through demonstrated capability becomes doctrine. While Soviet advisors teach North Vietnam to build redundant defenses, American pilots show that redundancy fails when every node is vulnerable. Human skill, not technological superiority, tips the balance. 6 pilots, 6 jets, 187 seconds, and Kien An stays dock for 6 weeks. By mid-October, word of the Kiến An strike circulates through Yankee Station's ready rooms. A-4E pilots joke that they finally have street cred against the phantom drivers. Maintenance officers calculate sortie generation rates and realize that scooters can fly twice as many missions per day as intruders, with half the man-hours per flight. The air wing adjusts its tasking matrix. More A-4Es on interdiction hops, more F-4s on cap and iron hand. The shift is subtle, barely visible in daily flight schedules. But it compounds. The operational consequences of the Kiến An strike ripple outward through the fall of 1967. Between the 8th of October and the 15th of December, Carrier Air Wing 16 flies 347 A-4E sorties against targets in route packages 5 and Vions. Of those sorties, 68 hit airfields, port facilities or transportation choke points previously reserved for A-6 intruders or Air Force F-105 Thunder Chiefs. On the 14th of October, 4 A-4Es from VA-164 strike the Zhongfeng Thuong rail bridge south of Hanoi, dropping the center span into the Red River with 12 Mk-83 1,000-pound bombs. On the 3rd of November, 6 jets from VA-163 crater the Hongai coal loading pier, halting exports to China for 3 weeks. The pattern repeats. Small packages, precise execution, measurable disruption. Total ordnance delivered by A-4Es during that period exceeds 520 tons. Mk-82 bombs, Mk-A-3 1,000-pounders, and Rockeye cluster munitions. Target damage assessments, compiled from reconnaissance photos and signals intelligence, show a 71% success rate. Craters where craters were intended, structures destroyed, rail lines cut. The 71% success rate matches A-6 intruders at 74% and exceeds F-105s at 63%. A-4Es fly daylight visual strikes. F-105s often operate at night in degraded weather. May-CV analysts conclude in January 1968 that visual delivery achieves effects comparable to radar systems when conditions permit. But within Navy strike planning cells, the Kien An mission becomes a reference point, proof that the oldest jet in the inventory remains relevant against hardened targets. Carrier Air Wing commanders begin experimenting with mixed formations, 2 A-4Es and 2 F-4s on a single package, instead of 4 F-4s alone. The A-4Es deliver bombs. The Phantoms suppress SAMs and engage MiGs. Fuel efficiency improves. Skyhawks burn less gas per sortie, extending time on station and reducing tanker demand. By March 1968, A-4E availability rates aboard Oriskany reach approximately 75 to 80%, compared to roughly 65 to 70% for A-6 intruders aboard other carriers and 70 to 75% for F-4 Phantoms. Higher availability means more sorties. More sorties mean more ordnance on target. The cumulative effect is measurable. North Vietnamese logistics officers report increased difficulty moving supplies along coastal highways during daylight hours. Truck convoys shift to night operations. Rail schedules become erratic. Port unloading slows. None of these disruptions trace to a single cause, but the pattern suggests sustained pressure from persistent air strikes. The North Vietnamese response evolves. By late November 1967, flak concentrations around key targets increase by an estimated 30%. New 57mm and 85mm batteries appear at bridges, rail yards, and petroleum storage sites. SA-2 sites proliferate. By January 1968, the Defense Intelligence Agency counts 31 active SAM sites in Route Package 6, up from 22 in September 1967. The thickening defenses raise loss rates. Between October 1967 and March 1968, the Navy loses 11 A-4Es over North Vietnam, 7 to flak, 3 to SAMs, 1 to a MiG-17. The loss rate translates to 1 jet per 280 sorties, higher than the pre-October figure of 1 per 350 sorties. But sortie volume climbs faster than losses. The Navy flies 3,100 A-4E sorties in that 6-month window, compared to 2,400 in the preceding 6 months. More missions mean more risk exposure, but also more cumulative damage to North Vietnamese infrastructure. The trade-off becomes explicit in air wing planning sessions. Accept higher attrition in exchange for sustained pressure. Pilots understand the calculus. They know the odds. Every time they go north, they're rolling dice. But if they don't hit the North Vietnamese, the consequences will be worse later. By April 1968, the Kien strike fades into the operational background. One mission among thousands, notable only to those who flew it or studied it closely. But its influence persists in training syllabi, target selection criteria, and aircraft procurement debates. At Naval Air Station Lemoore, A-4 instructors use gun camera footage from the Kien strike to teach dive bombing geometry. They freeze frames at key moments: the roll-in, the dive stabilization, the pickle point, the pull-off. Student pilots watch the same 3-minute sequence dozens of times, internalizing the rhythm. At the Pentagon, Navy budget analysts estimate the A-4's cost per sortie at approximately $4,000 to $4,500, including fuel, ordnance, and maintenance, compared to $7,500 to $8,000 for an A-6 sortie and $8,500 to $9,500 for an F-4. The cost differential matters in a war where fiscal constraints tighten month by month. Congress appropriates funds for 48 additional A-4Es in fiscal year 1968, extending the production run that was scheduled to end in 1967. Douglas Aircraft delivers the last new-build Skyhawk in February 1970. Many of those late production jets will fly combat sorties into the early 1970s. The decision to keep the A-4 in production rests on multiple factors: cost, availability, carrier deck space. But the Kien strike provides a data point that validates those factors. Meanwhile, North Vietnam adapts. After Kiến An, airfield defenses receive priority upgrades: more guns, more SAM coverage, hardened revetments with steel-reinforced concrete walls. The improvements work. By mid-1968, successful airfield strikes become rarer and costlier, but the adaptation arrives too late to erase the October 1967 lesson. Defense planners in Hanoi internalize the reality that no fixed site, airfield, bridge, depot, can be made invulnerable to determined air attack. The strategic implication is profound. North Vietnam's air defenses can raise costs, but not eliminate risk. That incomplete security forces decentralization. Supplies dispersed, logistics fragmented, redundancy built into every system. Decentralization reduces catastrophic loss, but increases operational friction. Trucks take longer to reach the front. Fuel deliveries miss schedules. Ammunition stockpiles shrink. American air power cannot win the war through interdiction alone, but it can impose a drag coefficient that slows North Vietnamese operations and complicates planning. The Kien strike, small in isolation, exemplifies that drag effect: one field offline for 6 weeks, multiplied by dozens of similar strikes across the theater, adds up to measurable degradation. In Saigon, May-CV statisticians track interdiction metrics: rail cuts, bridge outages, port closures, and observe a correlation between strike tempo and North Vietnamese logistical delays. The correlation is not proof of causation, but it suggests that sustained pressure yields cumulative returns. By late 1968, the air campaign over North Vietnam enters a partial pause as peace talks begin in Paris. Strike sorties decline. A-4E squadrons shift focus to Laos and South Vietnam. But the lessons from October 1967 remain embedded in doctrine. Light attack jets, flown by skilled pilots, can achieve effects disproportionate to their size. 50 years later, that lesson echoes in modern light attack programs. The A-29 Super Tucano, the AT-6 Wolverine, aircraft designed for permissive or semi-permissive environments where simplicity, cost, and precision matter more than stealth or speed. The A-4E Skyhawk never achieves the fame of the F-4 Phantom or F-14 Tomcat. It works. It drops bombs on target, day after day, in weather and flak that would ground less rugged designs. It fits 2 jets into the deck space one Phantom occupies, doubling sortie capacity per carrier. It costs half as much to operate and requires half the maintenance man-hours. Those advantages, mundane and unglamorous, define its legacy. On the 8th of October 1967, 6 Skyhawks proved that small jets with good pilots can crater an airfield defended by 57mm guns and SA-2 missiles. The bombs walk across Kiến An's runway in a line 180 feet long. The flak bursts in black puffs that miss by 20 feet. The arresting wire slaps the deck as each jet traps back aboard Oriskany, one after another, until all 6 are safely home. Commander Robert C. Mandeville, commanding officer of VA-163 Saints, on the 8th of October 1967, from the CVW-16 after-action report says, "We did what we trained to. Do, put bombs on target and bring everyone home." That sentence, matter-of-fact and unadorned, summarizes the mission. No drama, no hyperbole, just execution. The outcome speaks for itself. Kiến An stays closed for 41 days, the Navy loses 0 jets, and the myth that light attack jets are too small to matter dies in the smoke over Hải Phòng. The A-4E Skyhawk remains in U.S. Navy service until 1976, when the last Fleet Squadron transitions to the A-7 Corsair II. By that time, Skyhawks have flown more than 250,000 combat sorties over Southeast Asia, delivering an estimated 750,000 tons of ordnance. The jet's loss rate, approximately 1 per 2,500 to 3,000 sorties over North Vietnam, compares favorably to the F-4 Phantom at roughly 1 per 2,400 to 2,800 sorties, and significantly exceeds the Air Force F-105 Thunderchief at approximately 1 per 1,800 to 2,000 sorties. Those numbers reflect not invulnerability, but the combination of speed, small size, and pilot discipline. Commander Robert Mandeville retires from the Navy in 1973 with the rank of captain, having flown 312 combat missions over North Vietnam. He never returns to Kien An. Post-war satellite imagery shows the runway fully repaired with expanded revetments and additional flak positions. The base remains operational until 1975, when the fall of Saigon ends the war. Today, Kiến An Air Base serves as a commercial airport for Hải Phòng, handling domestic flights within Vietnam. The revetments are gone, replaced by passenger terminals and cargo facilities. No historical marker commemorates the October 1967 strike. In the United States, the National Naval Aviation Museum in Pensacola, Florida, displays an A-4E and VA-163 Saints livery. The jet, Bureau number 15252, flew 287 combat missions between 1966 and 1970. It never took battle damage severe enough to require depot-level repair. Museum visitors walk past it without pausing. The placard mentions light attack and carrier-based, but omits specific missions. The Kien An strike appears in one academic monograph, a 1982 RAND study titled Single-Seat Attack Aircraft in High-Threat Environments, a Vietnam Case Study. The study concludes that pilot skill and mission planning outweigh platform sophistication in determining strike effectiveness. That conclusion, based partly on the Kien An data, influences Navy training priorities for the next decade. But few outside defense analysis circles read RAND monographs. The mission fades into archival obscurity, remembered by the men who flew it and forgotten by nearly everyone else. Which is fitting. The Skyhawk was never built for glory. It was built to carry bombs, deliver them accurately, and return to the carrier. On the 8th of October, 1967, it does exactly that. Kiến An's runway cracks under 36 Mk-82s. 6 pilots trap back aboard Oriskany without a scratch. The mission succeeds not because the jets are exceptional, but because they are good enough. And the men flying them are very good indeed. That combination, repeated across thousands of sorties, is how wars are fought and targets are destroyed. Battlefield geometry rewards speed and precision over mass and complexity. The smallest jet in the fleet proves that payload per aircraft matters less than ordnance on target and delivery accuracy. North Vietnam's defenses, designed to stop heavy bombers, fail against light attack jets flown by disciplined pilots. The A-4E Skyhawk, dismissed as too small, craters an airfield defended by 57mm guns and SA-2 missiles. Small jets, big effects, precision beats size under fire. The lesson echoes across 50 years. Execution trumps expectation.